Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. So today, we're diving into something that taps into a really specific but completely universal fear. Think about the last time you took public transit late at night. You've got the isolation, right? Those flickering fluorescent lights, the gentle rocking of the carriage. It's this totally mundane experience, but it always kind of feels like it's teetering right on the edge of the unknown. Well, we're going to break down the absolutely terrifying case of a guy named Ethan and his fateful phantom commute to Blackwood Station. By looking at the evidence left behind, we'll map out exactly how a totally normal journey home warped into an absolute nightmare. Okay, let's dive right into this. The whole mystery we're unpacking today revolves around one single, desperate warning. Just 5 words: don't take the last train. And this chilling message, it wasn't texted to anyone, it wasn't spoken. It was actually found written on the inside of a dusty window of an abandoned train carriage, clearly traced out by trembling fingers. This phrase is literally the starting point for decoding Ethan's chilling disappearance. So to understand how Ethan ended up leaving this terrifying warning, we've got to reconstruct his journey, minute by agonizing minute.
Part 1. Boarding the last train. A normal commute begins. So the timeline kicks off precisely at 11:57 p.m. Ethan arrives at the station and heads straight to Platform 3 to catch the very last train home. And look, we've all been there, right? You're exhausted, you just want to get back to your own bed, and you feel that massive wave of relief when you make it right before midnight. The station itself was almost completely empty, save for a cold wind and some old flickering lights above him. But this emptiness is actually crucial to the story. It completely lulled Ethan into a false sense of security. He just thought he was experiencing the typical, everyday quiet of a late-night commute.
Let's establish a baseline here by looking at the only other occupants in Ethan's carriage. When he stepped inside, there were exactly 3 other people. You had an old woman simply staring out the window, a man in a black suit quietly reading a newspaper, and a little girl sitting entirely alone at the far end of the car. Now, on the surface, this is a perfectly standard cross-section of late-night commuters. They're quiet, they're keeping to themselves, just minding their own business. The doors close, the chime rings, and the train starts moving. Up to this point, everything is functioning exactly as it should.
Part 2. The impossible route. Reality fractures.
Now, this next part perfectly captures the shift from everyday routine to deep psychological dread. Initially, Ethan is totally in his zone, headphones on, scrolling his phone, just completely blocking out his environment, like we all do. But then, the creeping horror begins to set in. 10 whole minutes pass without a single stop. And if you've ever been on a city subway or a commuter line, 10 minutes without stopping is highly unusual. So when he finally looks out the window, expecting to see passing buildings or platform signs, he sees nothing. Just endless, absolute darkness. It's like the familiar infrastructure of his entire city had just vanished.
And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying realization that hits him next. A chill runs down Ethan's spine, so he gets up and walks over to the glowing carriage map above the doors to see what's going on. But the stops listed on the digital screen, they are completely wrong. They read Raven Hollow, Dead Men's Crossing, and Blackwood Station. Now, remember, Ethan has lived in this city his entire life. He knows the transit grid like the back of his hand. He has never, ever heard of a single one of these places. He hasn't just missed his stop, guys. He has somehow slipped entirely off the map of the known world.
Part 3. The 3 Passengers. A terrifying shift.
Okay, so let's look back at our 3 baseline passengers for a second. Remember the old woman who was just looking out the window? Well, she slowly turns her head and her eyes are completely solid black. She just whispers, "Don't get off." The man in the suit lowers his newspaper to reveal this pale, completely expressionless face and simply states, "Too late." And that little girl sitting alone, her head tilts at a sharp, totally unnatural angle, and she asks, "Have you seen my parents?" In just a matter of seconds, that thin veil of normalcy completely drops. It becomes terrifyingly obvious that these are not commuters at all. They're participants in a highly orchestrated trap.
Let's trace this escalating tension, because I really want you to grasp the sheer panic of this sequence. So we start at 11:57 p.m. 10 minutes later, Ethan realizes the train isn't stopping. Then, out of nowhere, the train screeches violently and the lights put out. For 3 agonizing seconds, the carriage is submerged in pitch-black darkness. Just imagine the sensory deprivation of that moment, trapped in a metal tube with whatever those entities were. When the lights finally flicker back on, the distance between Ethan and the little girl has vanished. She's standing right in front of him. But that's not even the most horrifying detail. Ethan looks down and realizes her feet aren't touching the floor. She's literally floating. The laws of physics have officially unraveled.
Eventually, the train grinds to a halt. The doors are about to open, which leaves us with the ultimate question. What on earth was waiting for Ethan at Blackwood Station?
Part 4. Arrival at Blackwood Station. The end of the line.
The scene waiting outside the window is one of just paralyzing dread. Through the glass, Ethan sees this rusted, decaying sign confirming his location, Blackwood Station. But it's who is waiting on the platform that really freezes his blood. Dozens of shadowy figures are just standing there in this thick fog. They are perfectly still. None of them move. None of them blink. And the air that rushes in as the doors slide open feels like literal ice. It's an ambush of pure silence.
And let's see how this builds through the automated train announcements, because they actually function almost like procedural instructions for his doom. Step 1 was the approach. Next stop, Blackwood Station. Step 2 commands the impossible commute to end. All passengers must exit. At this prompt, the old woman stands up, the man in the suit stands up, the little girl just smiles. One by one, they walk off the train and onto the platform. And the exact moment they do, every single shadow waiting in the fog turns their head toward Ethan at the exact same time, slowly, silently, just watching him. And then the doors begin to close, trapping him inside. In a final act of utter desperation, Ethan lunges forward and slams his hand against the emergency button, but nothing happens. Instead of sounding an alarm, the train speakers crackle to life with step 3, you boarded the wrong train. At that exact moment, the overhead lights physically explode. Total darkness completely swallows the carriage, and suddenly, Ethan realizes he isn't alone anymore. He hears hundreds of overlapping whispers surrounding him in the blackness, all hissing a single terrifying invitation, stay with us.
Part 5. The eerie aftermath. The morning discovery.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is what the railway workers actually found when the sun came up the next day. They did locate the specific train Ethan boarded, but it wasn't at a station, no. It was parked miles away on an abandoned, decommissioned track. The carriage doors were wide open to the elements. The seats were entirely empty. There were no passengers to be found anywhere. Even the driver of the train was missing. And honestly, perhaps most unsettling of all, there were zero signs of a physical struggle. There was no broken glass, no dropped bags, no scuff marks, just an absolute deafening absence of life. It was almost as if Ethan had simply been erased from reality.
Which brings us right back to the only piece of physical evidence that actually remained. On a dusty window, written from the inside with trembling fingers, were those 5 words, "Don't take the last train." Ethan left us a map of his disappearance, a frantic warning carved out in his final moments before the shadows took him. I mean, it really makes you think differently about your own commute, doesn't it? The next time you find yourself alone on a train platform right before midnight and the carriage pulls up completely empty, are you going to step inside?